excited about tonight's webinar, super excited about tonight's presenter. And so first off, I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us this evening. We got a great webinar lined up for you this evening, and so really want to start today's webinar off by going through, which many of you are already familiar with, and that is our SASE Vision as well as our SASE Mission. So as many of you already know, our vision is that SASE is the go-to organization for talent and leadership development in science, engineering, and technology. Our mission is to prepare Asian heritage scientists and engineers for success in the global business world, to celebrate diversity on campuses and in the workplace, and to provide opportunities for members to make contributions to their local communities. So again, I want to thank each and every one of you, because it's because of each and every one of you that is allowing that for this mission and this vision to come alive. And so before I bring on our guest speaker for the evening, there's a couple of housekeeping items that I want to go through. So the first thing I want to do is, again, illustrate that tonight's webinar is going to be interactive. So there are going to be two portions that are going to be valuable for you to be aware of. One is the Q&A, question and answer platform, and the other is the showcase platform. Now, if you look in your screen, right about here, you're going to see a little icon that looks like that. Go ahead and hit on that button, and it's going to allow you to toggle between showcase, which is where you're going to find the different documents that Jennifer's going to be speaking about, as well as toggle back to the Q&A platform. So if you have a question that comes up during the presentation, please, we encourage you to go ahead and do that at that moment. Please be aware that there's about a 20-second delay from when we're actually speaking to when it hits you. So that way, when Jennifer gets to the Q&A portion, there will already be some questions waiting for her. And so again, as she's going to move through her presentation, there's going to be some documents, some forms that you're going to have the ability to go ahead and download for your use on your collegiate chapters, and you will find those documents under the showcase icon. So with that being said, what I'd like to ask each and every one of you to do right now is go ahead and click on that icon and go to the showcase platform right now, where you're going to find the check-in and registration form. So if you've already pre-registered, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Go ahead and click on that link and go ahead and sign in with the email address that you pre-registered for. And if you're joining us live and you haven't had a chance to pre-register, go ahead and register with that same link there as well too. So with that being said, because of tonight's content and how valuable it's going to be to everybody nationwide, there's a good chance that we are going to be going over the 30-minute time frame that we had announced. And so if you need to jump off, we totally understand. Don't worry about it. Just keep in mind that this is going to be recorded, and you'll be able to find it on YouTube as well as our Google Plus homepage. So again, if you're watching the replay on YouTube and you're wondering how to access these documents, just jump on over to our Google Plus homepage and find this webinar, and you can still actively take advantage of those links. And so, and one other thing that I want to mention is, I guess two other things. You know, if you find that we're moving too fast this evening, again, feel free to go back at a later reference to the replay to utilize these resources. And so, again, tonight is really here to help you grow and develop your leadership skills. And so, especially right now, as the school year is coming to a close, many of you have already selected your new leadership for the 2015-2016 school year. So congratulations to each of you who are new leadership, and thank you to all of our additional members that, again, are continuing to help SASE grow nationally. So each and every one of you are making an impact. So again, this webinar is directly for you. So if it's not your direct role to go out and fundraise, you know, still learn these skills, because they can be very valuable as you move on into the professional world as well too. So grab a pen, take some notes down. Anything that really hits you, you're going to definitely want to record this, especially if you want to turn around and share some of this information with your chapter. So, all right, guys and gals, that's everything that I wanted to say. So now I get the distinct honor and privilege to introduce our guest speaker, who's been with SASE for a very short period of time, but her impact has been tremendously felt. And so as I come onto this role, it's been amazing that I can now see both sides of what SASE looked like prior to her arrival and what it looks like now. So we're really excited to have her on board. So please help me welcome Ms. Jennifer Coulson.
Hi, thank you, Matt, and thank you to all of our listeners here tonight. My name is Jennifer Coulson. As Matt said, I'm coming to you live from Parker, Colorado. I am SASE National Office Manager. I've been with SASE since last August, so coming up on about a year, and we've had a lot of growth. I'm going to switch over to share my screen with you and get on with the slideshow here. Bear with me one moment, please. Hope you all are having a great evening. And again, I thank you for joining us. Here we are. So, once again, welcome to SASE National Leadership's webinar. The title of our talk tonight is Money Talks, How to Effectively Raise Funds and Leverage Resources for Your Chapter. As I mentioned, my name is Jennifer Coulson, and I am currently the office manager for SASE, which is a quick background on me and why I'm even talking about fundraising with you tonight. I went to the University of Florida. I earned both a bachelor's and a master's of science in environmental horticulture. But what led me into fundraising was that I minored in nonprofit administration while in graduate school. You might think that sounds really odd. Well, it is, but it was for a reason. I wanted to be the executive director of a botanical garden, and I was positioning myself to have background experience not only in plant sciences, but also in nonprofit administration. So I was taking courses that prepped me for learning how to create nonprofit bylaws, articles of incorporation, business plans, learning how to balance public budgets, budgets that don't make a profit, budgets that can be balanced on both the income and expense side, and also grant writing. I was formally trained by a National Science Foundation board member in grant writing, which was really my first introduction to fundraising. And when I graduated, I went on to become a program director, and in that role, I didn't have a direct role in fundraising, but programmatically, I was responsible for providing all of the information to our development director so that she could report on how we were using funds that were given to us. And then ultimately, I was hired to serve as an executive director of a botanical garden. And in that role, I was solely responsible for all of our fundraising efforts, anything from big gala events to grant writing to working with individuals, working with local businesses, working with foundations, and some other earned income opportunities. All funds that were generated, I was responsible for in that role. And I also served as a major gifts officer for a national organization, which means I worked on a national level working with individuals and corporations to solicit funds of $500 or more for this organization. So now I'm with SASE. I don't do fundraising now, but I'm really happy to be able to share some experiences with you, and I look forward to working with all of you if you have questions in the future. I am a resource for you. And here's what we are going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about relational development fundraising. And when I talk about relational development fundraising, there are several steps to it. Our first step is the identification step. This is your research area. This is where you are going to spend a lot of time finding out who is best suited to give to your chapter. The second step is the cultivation step. This is where you're building relationships with prospective donors. And an effective fundraiser will spend the majority of his or her time in this area here. Oops, pardon me. Pardon me. An effective fundraiser will spend the majority of their time in this phase here, identification and cultivation, because if you do a good job in these two phases, asking for or soliciting or making the solicitation in this phase will become very easy, and then hopefully it will lead to a gift whereby you enter the acknowledgement stage, whereby then you steward your donor to maintain a relationship with them. And at this point, it becomes very easy to maintain that relationship, and what you eventually want to do is you want to put them back in the pipeline, and back into that cultivation stage, because you want to ask them for another gift the following year. So let's, you might be asking yourself now, why am I here? Why am I here? Fundraising, that sounds scary. My guess is that you're here because you're interested in leadership. You're interested in your chapter's development. You're interested in putting on great events, and great events cost money, and they require a lot of resources. So you need to learn some fundraising skills. And fundraising skills are new life skills. These are probably skills that my guess is that most of you out there don't already have, because they don't teach fundraising in college. They do if you're talking about formal grant writing, but fundraising is really a life skill. It's really about building relationships with people. And this life skill can often lead to positions on nonprofit boards. And if you're not already aware of this, a lot of people that are leaders in their communities or leaders in their professional roles are asked to sit on nonprofit boards. It's a very prestigious request to be asked to sit on a nonprofit board. And the best people to be asked are people that have both leadership skills and fundraising skills. If you have fundraising skills, you are the creme de la creme for a nonprofit board member. But still, you might be saying fundraising is really scary. I mean, just about anybody I talk to about fundraising would rather be attacked by a swarm of bees than ask anybody for money. And that is true for anybody unless people are professional fundraisers. But I'm here to tell you tonight, it doesn't have to be scary. It really can be very rewarding. And when you look at people like Bill and Melinda Gates, who have an estimated $28 billion in total giving, imagine the fundraisers that work with these people. Imagine the fundraisers that have secured the gifts to make global impacts and how rewarding it could be. And imagine if you were able to just secure a $500 gift for your chapter, something that allowed you to put on a really awesome event that changed somebody's life, that went on to do great things in the world. That's a really rewarding experience. And so I want you to, if you don't leave this webinar with anything else tonight, start thinking about how fundraising can be rewarding and how it doesn't need to sound threatening. And for it to not sound threatening, we need to talk about self-confidence, because every fundraiser that's successful must really dive within themselves and believe in themselves. And you have to believe in your chapter. You have to believe in yourself and what you're doing. You have to believe that you're intelligent. You have to believe that your chapter is part of SASE National. The SASE National is a nationally recognized organization representing bright people, hundreds of collegiate chapters across the nation, thousands of collegiate members, really strong industry partners. You all have assets to offer people in this world. You're the future of this world, and you have value. So before you think about even asking anybody for anything, take a minute to remind yourself of the value that you offer, both you as an individual and your chapter, to prospective donors. So when we get into our research phase, or our identification and prospect phase, I have this slide for you here that lists some different pots of money, if you will. Notice in the upper right-hand corner we have Find a Handout in the showcase. So if you go to that showcase function that Matt was referring to, you'll find a document called Funding Sources. And this document was put together by our executive director, Mr. Con Vu, and it lists detailed different academic departments and how they may or may not apply to funding for your chapter. So all of these entities here, student body government, all the way around the circle here to Career Center, these are all academic at the university level pots of money. I'm not going to go into each one individually because it could take a lot of time in this webinar. We are short on time. But I do want to task you with, your first task after leaving this webinar is to review the handout in the showcase called Funding Sources and think about what Con has written about each of these pots of money and how it could apply to your chapter. I've added two other things over here, and that's local businesses and associations and prospective employers. Because what I'd really like to challenge you with as well is thinking outside of the university level. So here we're at the university level with our pots of money. Here we're outside of the university level. Fundraising is about being creative, and maybe the obvious choice isn't always the best choice. So we can get to some more ideas in a minute on local businesses, associations, and prospective employers. And really, when you're in your research phase and you're thinking about these different pots of money, different businesses, associations, academic departments, the real question is that you need to ask is, how can I connect a prospect's mission, values, business goals, and activities to my chapter's mission and values? What is the connection I have with them? Because you don't want to just be throwing darts in the sky thinking, well, surely this person wants to support my chapter. Well, why would they want to support your chapter? Is it because of an academic focus they may have with you on the university level? Is it because they're interested in leadership? They're interested in the mission of your chapter and SASE National's mission about developing leadership opportunities? Perhaps they're really connected with you because of your discipline. Are you an engineering major? Is that the connection? Or is it the culture? Is it your Asian heritage culture that could be of interest to a prospect? So you really want to get to the core of, why should they believe in me? What can I do for them? How am I of value to them? How do our interests and goals match with them? And from there, that's an invaluable connection that will lead you to a gift. So the first part in your research stage is for you to collect all this information, and I want you to think about creating a prospect sheet. And we're going to get into some nitty-gritty of this prospect sheet in a minute, but the overall purpose of this is so you can document information that doesn't just live in your head or the head of your buddy or the head of the vice president of the chapter that's going to graduate next year, and all of that information goes away. It needs to be documented somewhere so it lives on in perpetuity. And so basically you want to document things like names, contact information. Here we're talking about interest. I have start interests here. This goes back to, why should a company be interested in me? Your fundraising goals, your relationships. I'm going to move to the next slide here because I have a lot more detail on the next slide. On this slide, you'll also find that we have another handout in the showcase. This handout is titled RDT, and the RDT stands for Relational Development Tracking. It's a spreadsheet that I used when I was a major gifts officer with a team of 2 other fundraisers to track information and communication with current and prospective donors. I modified it a little bit. It's there for you in the showcase. This is going to be part of what we're tasking you with as well, to leave from this webinar with something active to work on. So I'm going to go through these elements here. When you keep in mind, in order to fit all this information on the slide, I have it in a table format, but in the handout, it's in a spreadsheet, so the headers are actually headers. So let's say we're thinking about a company, ABC Company. This is a very important piece of information here. Our contact name, our decision maker. This is not the receptionist of ABC Company. This is who makes decisions, who makes budget decisions, who makes decisions on how money is spent. And that piece of information can be difficult to get, and it often requires just picking up a phone and asking the question. Once you get that name, this is the person you need to develop a relationship with. Then this is great to just document some contact information, mailing addresses, email addresses, phone numbers, websites. I really should have these 2 cells flip-flopped here, because the next thing you want to ask yourself is, what are they interested in funding? And I have an example here, leadership development. So if I ask myself what their interests are, is it leadership? Is it the Asian heritage? Is it engineering? My next question is going to say, well, what funding opportunity do I have for them? And so here an example could be regional conference travel funds. And then this is kind of a shot in the dark here. Ask amount. Is this a really huge business that could afford to give me $50,000, or maybe they're a moderate company? Maybe I only really need $500. I'm just going to ballpark a number here so that I know. Am I asking for $10? Am I asking for free paper? Am I asking for $500? So it's just a ballpark. Budget cycle notes is something that's very important and often underlooked, and this is something that you will not have the information, the content for, until you start having conversations with this decision maker. So budget cycle notes would be, you want to find out when does the company give? Are they giving year-round? They'll just write a check any month of the year. Maybe they only give at the beginning of their budget cycle, or maybe they're waiting for the end of the calendar year that coincides with the tax season because they're looking for a tax-deductible contribution. And is it December and they haven't made enough contributions to hit their number for their deduction? They might give at the end of the year. Some private foundations have very specific times they meet to make a decision on when to give money. So you want to find out when that budget cycle is so that you know. Because, for example, if they are distributing funds in December, you want to start soliciting them probably in October because you want to say, hey, we'd like to make a request. I'm going to follow up with you. These things take time. You follow up, you finally meet in November, a check's cut in December before the year end, and that's when you receive it. So this is often a piece that's really often overlooked. Constituent code, this is something, a term that I've used, but really what we're looking for here is this is a way for you to segment your donors in this tracking sheet. Is it a corporation? Is it an individual? Is it one of those academic departments, private foundation, or is it an industry partner? It's just really more information for you to be able to sort in the spreadsheet. Here's another piece that's very vital, solicitor 1 and 2. You'll notice that I have 2 solicitors here because I don't ever want to be the only person that has a relationship with Mr. David Smith, because something could happen to me. You never know where life takes you. People graduate from college. It's a very common transitional stage there, and so you always want to have a solicitor 2, somebody else on deck, somebody that knows who Mr. David Smith is, somebody who accompanies you on meetings, who when Mr. Smith comes to your events, he's also familiar with, so that this person, when you leave, when you step out of your role, this person easily transitions into this role and immediately has a relationship here. Often overlooked. You never want to be the only solicitor. And then here we've got last section date. So you want to keep record in case you know, I'm out of town, I'm out of the country, I can't be found, and we want to know, well, what happened? What's the last time we talked to Mr. Smith? Well, I met with him to introduce him to the chapter and discuss the interest and see how we align, and that was on May 1st. And then I've tasked myself for the next step to follow up with an email inviting him to a chapter function, and I'm going to do that within 1 week's time, and so I have a date. Again, this isn't a spreadsheet. All these things can be sorted so that you know when your action was, when your next action is due. And status, this is also just so that you know where they are in the cycle of fundraising. Are they in the identification, cultivation, solicitation, acknowledgement, or stewardship phase? This is information that, once again, can be passed down. So we're going to move into the cultivation or relationship building stage next, and I want to say that I referenced in the one slide pots of money with my graphic here on pots of money. But I really want to emphasize that when you are building a relationship with a prospective donor, you do not think of them and you do not treat them as a pot of money. This relationship, like any relationship, must be built upon trust and kindness. It must be professional. It must be mutually beneficial and respectful, based on those shared interests and values. It's appreciative. It's not treating the donor like an ATM machine. Somebody's not going to be inclined to give you a chapter or give your chapter funds or resources if you're just opening up your hands for cash and expecting something. It needs to be built upon the fact that you've built a relationship, they trust you, they believe in you, they believe in the chapter, and they want to support you. And when that comes, the money will come. The support will come, not only from a financial standpoint, but from a relationship standpoint as well. So in this stage, you need to ask yourself, who is going to make the contact? You know, is it your chapter president? Is it somebody that you've appointed to be kind of a fundraising developmental role within the chapter? But who is going to make the contact? And then how is he or she going to make the contact? Are you going to pick up the phone and make a phone call or send an email? I have a star next to personal introduction here because this is your creme de la creme right here. If you can get a personal introduction to a potential donor, that is by far the most successful way to entree into building that relationship. If you know somebody that knows somebody, then you need to ask, hey, can you please help me set up a meeting? I would really like to introduce Mr. Smith to my chapter, and I would love to let him know what our activities are and invite us to some functions. Then you ask if that personal introduction can be set up, and from there it is smooth sailing. It can be much, much more difficult to make the phone call or an email. This is really kind of cold calling at this point here, which you can do as well, and I'm gonna get to some language you can use shortly, but this is where it's most effective. And so you need to think about how you're going to introduce the chapter and its activities and needs. Are you having a coffee meeting, which would be great? Are you inviting them to one of your events? Are you giving a formal presentation where you stand up and speak about your chapter? You need to kind of think about your proposal, think about a presentation that you might give. Really focus on the chapter's activities and what the chapter needs. When you start communicating with the donor about what it is that you're doing, you also really should be communicating about what you need. In order to have these events, we need funds and we need resources to be able to pull them off successfully. And once you start communicating that to the donor, they immediately know, they understand what you're asking for, and they're either going to be on board and want to back you with that, or they're not. And then last but not least is the very, very important thing of what value are you offering the prospect. And that's what you need to focus on, because that's how you're going to engage them. And that's your bait, that's your hook. That's how you're going to sink them into supporting the chapter. And this comes up in kind of this phase next of, well, what do I ask for? And so what you really should have, you should have an overall chapter budget for what your overall expenses are and where you expect to receive funds from. But my advice to you is that raising funds for overhead is very difficult compared to raising funds for specific programs and events. So if you have a specific program and an event, break that budget out so that you can get an idea of what it is that you need, who you can ask for help from, and then also be able to show that donor, hey, I'm not just looking to you to support the entire event. Look at how I'm diversifying my funding pools and I'm diversifying our partners. And I'd like to show you the budget. So this can be a very powerful tool. This is a really simple budget I put together for, let's say you want to do a morning breakfast leadership workshop. Well, let's say you would like some coffee. Let me tell you guys, Starbucks gives away coffee to anybody. You have somebody go pick up the container, they'll give you your cups, your sugar, your creamer, your napkins, your stirs, and somebody brings the container back. It's very, very simple. What do they get for it? Advertising, recognition, Starbucks logo, and your event. In events, food and beverage is always the most expensive line item you're going to have. So who has money? Who has money to support your large dollar line items? Well, they're your banks, your insurance companies, your attorneys, a lot of individual professional service providers. And you may be thinking, wow, Jennifer, you're crazy if you think that any of those people are going to support me. Well, this is where I'm challenging you to be creative, because what if ABC Bank moved a new branch down the street from your campus? What if you could go to a new banker at that bank and say, hey, I have 60 chapter members that are all in line to become top engineers in their field, and I'd like to give you exposure to these future clients. For just only $500, you could support our breakfast, and in turn, I can give you exposure and advertising to these future clients. So I don't think that's far-reached. You all, like I said, have value. You have assets. You may not have a lot of money in the bank right now, but you will in the future, hopefully. And then also just being creative about the types of supplies you need for your events. Could you approach a local copy and paper company about offering in-kind services for paper and printing? Now, some of these examples are going to differ widely based on which university you're at. If you're at a large university like I was, like the University of Florida, that's located in a town with, primarily college students and organizations, those kind of donations are difficult to get. Now, if you're in New York City, where the demographic is not only college students and you have a lot of different diversified businesses, you might be able to find some people interested in doing in-kind services and donations. How about the Alumni Association giving you some pens? How easy would that be? Because they want their alumni to become future members and to donate to them every year. Trust me, I get approached by the University of Florida Alumni Association all the time, and I have a lot of pens from them. They gladly give them out. A room in kind from your department, well, this is something you need. Let's go ahead and document it so that once again you're showing diversified funding sources. You might not think to write it down in a budget, but you should. You should really show that the engineering department is supporting you if that's where you got your room. And a speaker, and I threw this out here, Asian Chamber of Commerce. What a great way for your mission and the culture of the organization to tie in with a great speaker in the community. And also, once again, looking for exposure to future members. Wouldn't your local Asian Chamber of Commerce love for you to join in the future and become a leader in their organization one day, and maybe even a fundraiser in their organization one day? So now we're going to move into the solicitation, or as development professionals would call it, the ask phase of relational development fundraising. Again, here in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see find a handout in the showcase. I'll get to that in a moment. The best and most powerful way is to verbally ask somebody, and this may seem terrifying. This might be the swarm of bee attacking you stage for you. But if you've done your job well, and you've done your research well, and you've built that relationship well, then you'll know that this prospect is either interested in supporting you in the organization or not. So at this point, it can be very, very easy to look somebody in the eye and be professional and to say, hey, we've talked about needing some resources to pull this event off, and could I count on your support this year? And I know that sounds really scary, but once again, once you've built this relationship, it should be a complete breeze. Something to make it a little bit easier and to kind of bridge your way between that cultivation and the solicitation phase would be to go ahead and craft a formal letter to a prospect. So that's what you're going to find in this showcase here, is there's a template and an example. And I can't take full credit for this. I actually found it on UT Austin's website, and I thought it was so simple and such a great template that all you have to do is plug in your chapter's information. It's just a great template. So, but and basically you want it to be on your chapter letterhead. Make sure you run this by the marketing department so that you're kosher with SASE marketing. You want to introduce the chapter, the program, the purpose, who's benefiting, and then what's the sponsor going to get out of it? Going back to that original question of how are we in line and what are they receiving? Are they going to get promotion? Is this advertising money for them? And how are we going to promote them? Or are they just doing it out of the kindness of their heart, or is it a tax-deductible contribution? Put that into a letter, and then you're going to say, I'm going to follow up with you in a week with either a phone call or an email, and to discuss further. So when that week passes, you go back to that tracking spreadsheet, and now you've tasked yourself with following up with them in a week, and then you're going to make the call or send an email and say, hey, Mr. Smith, I hope you had a chance to read my letter, and I'd love to discuss with you further our program and our needs. Would you have time to meet? And the donor is automatically going to be very interested in you or not, and they're going to say, yes, great, let's go ahead and proceed with a gift, or let's set up a meeting. And if they set up a meeting, you come enthusiastic because they're agreeing to a meeting, they're likely going to support you. Or they could say no, and if they do say no, don't let that be a, wah, wah, wah moment where you're hanging your head thinking you're defeated. At that point, you say, well, I appreciate you listening, Mr. Smith. Would there be an opportunity in the future to approach you? And let the conversation go from there. But hopefully, you can move them into the acknowledgement stage. And the acknowledgement stage is really about thanking them. And the timing of this can't be more crucial. You can't let a week or a month go by without telling Mr. Smith thank you. So I implore all of you, immediately if somebody makes a gift, you make a personal phone call. And I understand that in today's technology, everybody emails and texts and nobody picks up the phone. But if you have a donor that's giving you money, it's very respectful and polite to pick up the phone and make the phone call that thanks them personally. It shows enthusiasm and appreciation in your voice. But you also, on top of that, want to do handwritten thank you notes, and definitely a formal thank you letter if they have given you cash that is tax deductible, because this is how they are going to keep record of their gift for their account, and so they get the tax deductible contribution benefit. And some examples of the components of this thank you letter, which again, timeliness, I'm seeing here within 3 days. If you're a professional fundraiser, you do this within 3 days, absolutely. It needs to be, again, on your letterhead. It needs to state the dollar amount. If you had, how many people came, how did the donor benefit, and you want to thank him at the beginning, thank him in the end, you can't thank him enough, and include whatever information you can that could be helpful to take the next step to stewardship. And I did touch on this about what if the answer is no, what if they said no. The process is still the same. You're still thanking them. You're still saying, I acknowledge that you took the time to listen to my solicitation. I acknowledge that you took the time to learn about my chapter and its activities. Would there be an opportunity in the future to connect with you again? Could we ask you in a different year, a different time of the year for something else? Would you ever be interested in supporting our chapter again? And if they say yes, please do. Let's talk about some other opportunities or other timing. You're going to move them into the next stage, which is stewardship. And if they say no, then you respect that, and you'll need to remove them from your prospect list. So the last stage is stewardship. Professional fundraisers will call this touch points. This is how you maintain this relationship that you've built with the donor. And it's all about just touching them throughout the year. If it's, again, I mentioned how great handwritten thank you notes are. If you could send pictures of events that they supported, maybe you have a couple of members write testimonials about how the event impacted their lives and their learning experience, something really nice for the donor to read. If it's reports that show data that shows the ROI, and if you're not familiar with this term, you should be return on investment. How did that donor's investment give them a return? SASE National does this with its sponsors for the national conference. We give them a lot of data to show them their return on their investment. Any kind of updates you can give them throughout the year, you know, hey, we sent 10 people to SASE National Conference, and this is what we learned. It was a great learning experience. Or this is so wonderful, our chapter president just graduated cum laude. Any kind of updates, success stories, inviting them to be a part of your events or programs. This is all stewardship. These are ways that you're not asking them for money, but you're continuing to cultivate that relationship, because they've already given you a gift at this point. You want to be able to move them, like I said, back into that cultivation phase, and next year ask them again for another gift. So wrapping up here, I just have a few words of wisdom. First one here, it's easier to keep a donor than to create a new one. This is principle of donor retention. So this is where that stewardship phase is so important, is because if you can keep an old customer, all you do is move them from stewardship right back into cultivation. Otherwise, this is you constantly recreating the wheel, doing more research, more cultivation. A donor that likes you, you're going to just continue to steward that relationship here, which is much easier. Don't double dip. And what I mean here is that SASE National, as you all know, puts on a huge national conference, and we have wonderful, strong industry partners that contribute to high levels to the conference. And I'd like to ask you to be very sensitive when thinking about doing your research and your prospecting. If you're thinking about any of these corporations that might sponsor SASE National, we don't want to offend or be tacky or ask people twice from different levels within our organization. So if you could please, if you're thinking about approaching a company that may or may not support SASE National, please run it by your regional manager, or even contact me directly by email, because we certainly don't want to offend our big corporate sponsors for our conference. This is also here about stewardship. Don't let the only communication be about asking for money. Don't constantly be holding your hand out saying, woe is me, we need money. Again, you want to share those success stories, share updates, share photos, invite them to be a part of the organization. That is going to be what cultivates bigger gifts, year-over-year gifts. That's going to be what sustains gifts for this chapter long after you're gone. And remember, the key to successful fundraising is about relationships. It's based on trust, respect, shared values and interests. It's I can't hone on this enough. When a donor trusts you and respects you and you're appreciative and that relationship's there, the money will follow. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and flip back to the Q&A section. I know that I have run over the amount of time that we discussed. I'm not sure what's going on with my screen here. Okay. I'm not sure what's going on with my screen, but I do see our first question, and the first question is, when we have 2 solicitors per company, how should both solicitors coordinate conversation? And that's an absolutely fabulous question. The answer is this: solicitor number 1 should always be the primary solicitor. So if I am the primary solicitor, I should always be the one coordinating conversations. Solicitor number 2 should be a bystander of the coordination. If solicitor number 1 is unavailable, solicitor number 2 could step in. But definitely the number 1 means primary, and always primary, so that you're never stepping on anybody else's toes. But number 2 always knows the conversations that the primary is in. Great question, thank you. Do we have any other questions? Does everybody see how you can move into the Q&A part of the webinar here?
Thank you. That was outstanding, and so we'll give it a couple more seconds to see if we have any other questions that come in, and if we do, then obviously we'll go ahead and allow you to go ahead and answer those as well too. So definitely wanted to thank you for that. I know I took a lot of great notes over here, and so if no other questions come in, I can go ahead and start to bring today to a close. And so let me go ahead and turn my camera back on. And so one of the key takeaways that I got from your presentation was that how important it is to really develop these relationships. So the art of fundraising truly is more than just going out and asking for money. It's actually developing and cultivating a relationship. And so you know, this webinar truly had something for everybody. So if there was if this was new information to you on the line, then perhaps this was a great start. Hopefully it wasn't overwhelming, and if that is the case, feel free to come back and listen to this webinar multiple times, so that way you can continuously learn step-by-step processes that you can move forward with. And so, you know, again, one of the things that I really took away was the piece that you had on the self-confidence and, you know, what it really takes to move forward. And so I know one of my mentors had once told me that the most powerful story that we will ever hear is the story we tell ourselves about ourselves. So the true question is can we envision ourselves moving forward and creating these relationships with different individuals, whether they are on campus or whether they are within corporation, and so what we can do to truly keep moving those relationships forward. And so let's see here. I understand we had a couple more questions come back in, so I will go ahead and throw it back to you, Jennifer.
Thanks, Matt. I'm sorry if I wasn't on the right screen there, everybody. I apologize for that. We did have a couple of other questions come in, and let's see, we've got a question here. If we have two sponsors who are direct competitors, will we run into any issues? And if so, how do we manage that issue? And that's an awesome question, and I think it's a great problem to have, because what does competition do but breed competition? And if you have two prospects that are competitors, and they both see the value in your chapter and supporting your chapter, you want to leverage that competition and say, you know, we are in conversation with some of your other competitors, and it's possible that you could leverage that funds. Potential issues that could come up is that you don't ever want to have them have direct benefits, if you will. So always offer a package and secure a package with one before you secure the other, so that you're not stepping on toes. You're not saying this event is sponsored by ABC company and XYZ company equally. You'll want to try to cater a package so that you get exposure for them both, but in different ways. I'm not sure if I answered that well. Let's see, let me take a couple of other questions here. What if we are in a small town and we don't have that many companies to contact with? Well, that's a really good question too. And in that case, I would say to think on a regional basis. If you're only thinking on a local basis, you might be limiting your resources. So maybe try to think more regionally, perhaps even on a statewide. I don't know what town you're in. But I would say to expand your geographic area. And let's see, we have another question here. If I've never solicited money before, where should I start? So I really think the first step is going back to the process that I was trying to identify, that relational development fundraising is about a process that starts with identification, cultivation, solicitation, acknowledgement, and stewardship. And when you get back to identification, that's where you want to start. That's where you want to start in the research. And that's the not scary part of it. That's where you're just in your own office, you know, cyber stalking people, making notes, trying to collect information and research of what companies' interests are. Because when you find that information and you get that aha moment of, oh, ABC company is going to love me and love my chapter for this reason, then it's gonna get you pumped to get out the door and get started. So once again, solid research can lead to a good foundation for starting to cultivate that relationship. Let's see, some more questions. Okay, here's a good question here. Fundraising effort should be core value from each chapter. What are some of the resources SASE has for fundraising ideas? Or do you have specific fundraising ideas that could be good to try? I think that's a kind of a difficult question on a broad scale, because like I was trying to say, I think fundraising from each of your chapters is going to be just as unique for each of your chapters as it is as unique as you are as an individual, because your chapters are unique. You're geographically in different locations. You may be at a small university, private university, land-grant university. So I think that's kind of a complex question to say for all chapters. My challenge to you is to be creative. So if you're asking me, do I have specific ideas that would be good to try? Here's a specific idea that I was thinking about. Let's say we're talking about food and beverage, and that's one of the most expensive components to an event. Maybe there's an opportunity that a new Asian restaurant opened down the street. And maybe that restaurant's looking to get exposure. And clearly, well, not clearly, but probably the owner believes in the mission of SASE and believes in the Asian heritage. Could you perhaps approach that business to hold an event there, have them help sponsor part of the food, if not all of it? It would give them exposure for new clients to try their food and to try the new business in town. It could give you a venue, if anything, for free, a venue. Could it give you some of that food and beverage component, maybe not a total free cost, but maybe a deeply discounted, or could they supply appetizers, something like that? I always think supplies are something that you could go after for paper and things like that. Maybe go back to the budget sheet where I was trying to have a matrix of different diversified funding pots, if it's those academic pots that are off of Khan's worksheet, and really take a look at those, because there's some very good ideas there. Or is it professional associations like the Asian Chamber of Commerce, or is it an academic department, or is it a local business? Hope I answered your question. Let's see. Okay, here's a very, very good question. What do you mean by double dip? For example, since Shell sponsored National, does that mean it can't sponsor our chapter? Well, that's exactly the question that I would love for you to come to your regional manager and or directly to me, directly to Matt. Maybe the question needs to be taken all the way up to Khan, because those sponsors could vary depending on the company. So you're saying Shell for specifically, but I would really want to understand what company it is. I would like Khan to be in the conversation. I would like for the company that helps work with securing our sponsorships to be in the conversation, so that we just make sure we're not stepping on each other's toes. I'm not saying that Shell absolutely cannot be a sponsor, but what I'm saying is double check with SASE before you either offend the sponsor or offend SASE National or do something to damage a relationship. Let's just have that conversation first. I think that's all the questions I see now that are new that have popped up. I really appreciate everybody's time. I know that we've gone over. It's been almost an hour now. I hope this has been beneficial to you. I encourage you to contact me directly if you have any further questions. And Matt, do you want to take it back over?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you again, Jennifer. What an outstanding webinar. I'm actually getting text messages on how much people are actually enjoying today's content. So again, thank you again for sharing this. And again, to everybody else out there, if your question didn't get answered directly, realize that we are fortunate to have Jennifer just at an email away. So here is her email address. If you would like to email her a specific question, please feel free to do so. And so another thing that I wanted to mention is, if you go back to your showcase, Roland, if you could go ahead and activate the link to the SASE Scholarship. We're really excited to have a SASE Scholarship in place. And now this scholarship was sponsored by Kellogg Company, as many of you know, who live in the world of breakfast, and so they've been gracious enough to be able to help SASE grow and really to help you, get through school. And so we're excited. There's a link there in the showcase that'll take you directly to our website, and as you can see, that we are accepting applications up until June 12th. So if you would like to potentially receive scholarship for this upcoming school year, I highly recommend you submitting your information. And so we've been fortunate enough to receive 5 scholarships at $1,500 a piece. And so really excited to really see this continuing to evolve, because this is the first scholarship that SASE has been able to provide. So again, SASE just continues to move forward, and it's all thanks to you and your contribution there on the collegiate level. So with that being said, the next webinar, mark your calendars, is Wednesday, July 29, 2015, again at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And this one, I know, is one that everybody here, a lot of people on the line are looking forward to learn more about, is all things national conference and why you need to be there. So we've got our SASE National Conference Coordinator, Jessica Moy, along with potentially multiple of our team members who are going to be going through as I mentioned, all things national conference. So again, mark your calendar. Definitely looking forward to getting those updates. And so really utilize the information you obtained today. And so some action steps to walk away from this webinar is, go back and really review the funding sources document that we provided here this evening, because that's really where you're going to be spending the majority of your time this upcoming summer. You're going to have a lot of free time potentially, and so this is good time to utilize that to developing these relationships. So utilize the funding sources document, as well as start prospecting and start tracking your progress, so that way you can see where the conversation with each of these contacts is going, but also you can also leave record for upcoming leadership, and so that way you can have a record for your chapter to really help promote the sustainability of your chapter, especially as new leadership comes in, year out. And so one more link that we're putting up in the showcase is our Survey Monkey website link. And so again, I want to thank each and every one of you that took the time to fill out our survey from our last webinar. We definitely took that information and are looking to deliver the content that you are asking for. And so again, please feel free to give us content and feedback on what you loved best about tonight's webinar, and we look forward to continuing providing you with content to help you develop your leadership skills, so that way not only you can develop your personal leadership skills, but you can also help the skills develop within that of your team right there on your collegiate campus. So again, I want to thank everybody for joining us here this evening. Again, this is all available on replay on YouTube, as well as our Google Plus homepage. And so until next time, we'll see you guys then. Thanks again for joining us. Bye-bye.